welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 22 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Alright, last time, things got pretty dicey. The Elric brothers had sort of initiated conflict with Scar in hopes of drawing out the homunculi. And meanwhile, the homunculi did indeed fall for the bait, but they've also confronted Ling Yao and one of his bodyguards. And considering that Wrath has shown up alongside Gluttony, it really seems like they're not in a good place. I mean, it really does seem like Wrath and Gluttony have the upper hand here. Because Ranfan is injured, and it looks to be reasonably bad. I mean, their weapons are able to injure the homunculi, but any injury is really only a temporary matter. And given what we've seen about Wrath, you know, he is a consummate combatant, so wounding him is really no mean feat. You know, we haven't seen anybody do it thus far, and I don't think Ling Yao fighting while encumbered with Ranfan's body, I don't think he's going to be able to do it. I find it interesting that Wrath is going so far as to operate more or less out in the open, considering that secrecy seems to be the modus operandi here, and that his cover as the head of the military is sort of something that needs to kind of stay intact for everything to stay underground. I mean, this fact isn't lost on Ling Yao. You know, he understands that Bradley is indeed rather high up here. Now, here's a point of contention I have, because he is referred to as Führer King Bradley, and at least as I understood it, it's Führer as the title and King Bradley as a name, King being a given name, Bradley being a surname. But, you know, that's not something that would be readily apparent just hearing it, you know. I feel like you'd need to, see it written in a formal context for it to make more sense. So just to drive the point home that there are other plot threads being tugged at here, we get this nifty little flashback about Winry's parents leaving for presumably the last time. So I get the feeling that whether the Elric brothers like it or not, Winry is about to get involved, and it's not gonna be good. You know, she seems to be showing up to, I guess a military cemetery, or just a cemetery. Maybe I'm pulling military out of thin air here. It puts me in mind of Arlington, but, you know, obviously she's paying respect to Hughes, along with his widow. I can't blame her, because, you know, maybe she doesn't feel guilt, per se, but, you know, she definitely feels bad for him. Can't say I blame her very much either. You know, it's very nice that the remnants of the Hughes family have taken to Winry so well. You know, she was really just like a house guest for, you know, one day, but I mean, I guess they need someone to lean on. It's heartwarming in a really sad kind of way. Alright, yeah, so this is how it starts. Winry just hears the word on the street that the Elric brothers are, getting caught up in trouble. And it's not just any trouble, it's, in all likelihood, potentially mortal trouble, so... Oh man, you know, she's associating it in her head that her parents going to die is equivalent to Edward going to die. So, you know, if she doesn't want to lose someone very important to her, she's gonna have to step up and do something. I mean, she has shown herself to be pretty proficient with stoving people's heads in with a wrench, but somehow I doubt that's going to do very much against Scar. I mean, you know, it might work once as like a surprise attack, but I don't think it's going to be any lasting strategy. So unfortunately, despite this being a part of their plan, the Elric brothers seem to have bitten off a bit more than they can chew. Scar is definitely a dangerous guy. Of course, the big issue is that they were sort of anticipating Ling shooting off a signal flare or something. Considering that he has many problems of his own, I highly doubt that that signal will be coming. So it's kind of interesting that Alphonse is trying to engage him in philosophical and ideological conversation. You know, the idea is you are using your god and your religion to justify murder. So he's trying to sort of like give him, I guess, pause if nothing else, but his convictions are too strong. And in a sense, Scar is not wrong in that alchemy is the source of a lot of these problems. He's merely using a part of alchemy to sort of solve the problems. I mean, the solution in his instance is murder, and he does make a good point in that killing Nina Tucker was a mercy, because any life she would have had would have been that of a prisoner and a test subject. And you know, that resonates with the Elric brothers because they know it to be true. You know, any life she would have had would have been awful, but they didn't have the fortitude to do anything about it, at least at the time. I mean, that's not to say that murdering her was a good thing per se, but, you know, I can at least understand where both sides are coming from. It's a nice nuanced conversation. You know, it's sort of an issue where both sides have their gray areas, and one side is in all likelihood slightly lighter in terms of a shade of gray than the others. Oh dear. Ed's about to spill the beans. Not only did he spill the beans, he spilled the beans right in front of Winry unwittingly. So he's really screwed the pooch here. You know, he's burdened Winry with knowledge, and he's displayed the fact that he knew about it and didn't tell her. And, you know, not only does she now know, she's also confronted with his killer. Or rather, their killer, I should say. Both parents, as it were doctors. So this sort of puts Scar on the back foot here. Because at least the way he was talking about Nina Tucker before, it really seemed like he did the marginally more correct thing. I really hesitate to say that, but it seems like a mercy killing is better than a life of experimentation. But in this instance, you know, she's saying, my parents were doctors, they saved you, you killed them. You know, that's unequivocally morally wrong. Even if they were Emestrians who were, you know, enacting the genocidal war. So, it's interesting that Winry is grappling with shooting and killing him in cold blood, and at the same time, Scar's sort of contemplating about the cycle of violence and how, you know, whether or not the chain should continue. You know, he says that... Oh, that's interesting. He even says himself that for Winry to shoot him would be totally justified. And, like, his body language seemed to indicate that he wouldn't even defend himself. He would accept... well, divine judgment, I guess. So we're getting a little bit of backstory here. Scar had a brother, and he tattooed alchemical tattoos on his arms, and those sort of allow him to deconstruct and reconstruct. I mean, obviously this is heretical according to his religion, but it's sort of presented under the guise of, you know, you need to understand the enemy to combat them. It's interesting in that people are considering using the alchemy even though it is considered a blasphemy, and they are a devoutly religious people. But, you know, it's a hard question. Is it better to be wiped out entirely or to survive via blasphemy? I mean, I guess the answer to that really depends on how devout you are. Of course, Scar sees what's really going on here in that in their blasphemy, they're sort of going down the road that they claim the state alchemists have gone down. That they intend to use alchemy as a weapon to wage war. And in a sense, you know, that makes them just as bad as the people they disagree with. I think this is a really interesting segment in that it really displays the true military might of alchemy, in that it's being used as artillery, it's being used to create walls and fortifications to box people in, it's conjuring up these raging infernos that immolate large groups of people. So I guess it's pretty understandable that Scar at this point in time is very reticent about using alchemy, even for what could be considered a good cause. Because is something really good if you use evil means to accomplish it? You know, that's sort of like the moral philosophy, the ends justify the means. The problem with that is that you never truly reach the end state. You know, there is always more, assuming all life doesn't end instantaneously. So it seems like Scar's brother was a bit of an odd man out, in that he doesn't really seem to share the disposition of the others. You know, he's willing to commit a heresy like studying alchemy, and he's prepared to sort of stand up, fight, and die, even though everything is understandably terrifying. Alright, so now the plot thickens a bit. Because here we have Kimberly, and he's shown up a little bit before. He was a state alchemist who was imprisoned. And I think we're getting a pretty good idea of why. You know, creating explosions seems to be his deal, and what interactions we've seen with him before, you know, he seems really keen on making things go boom. So it seems like he might have committed one too many war crimes for anyone else to stomach, thus landing himself in jail. I do also find it interesting that he had tattooed his palms with alchemical circles. Alright, so this sort of ties neatly in with the current plot. In the explosion, Scar lost an arm. And, you know, absent anything to staunch the bleeding, and absent anyone other than his brother, it really seems like the only thing to do is to, remove his own arm and graft it onto his brother via alchemy. So, you know, if nothing else, that would really amplify his hatred for alchemy, in that it seems to have been the thing that killed his brother and was unwillingly grafted onto him. I mean, on one hand, you can't complain too much about having your life saved, but at the same time, I'd imagine this is probably the worst possible way to have his life saved. You know, his brother's dead. He has been essentially branded as a blasphemer with alchemical tattoos. He's been saved by the enemy, who, horror of horrors, are acting seemingly out of compassion alone. And, you know, I could understand why that would make it everything worse. You know, you've seen these people do horrible war crime tier things, you know, leveling villages with bomb-like blasts, and at the same time, there are other people who look like them and share the same allegiances who are tending to you selflessly. I mean, it's pretty understandable that Scar freaks out at this point, you know. That's not his arm, but it's attached to his body, and all he remembers is that blast, so in all likelihood everyone else he knew is now dead. Man, that is gutting. Even as he was about to die, you know, Dr. Rockbell acted only defensively and for the sake of his wife. I mean, he didn't even make any moves to fight Scar off. I guess he really took the Hippocratic Oath seriously. You know, you can't just do harm to a patient. Personally, I would think self-defense would sort of supersede that, but then again, I'm not a doctor either. So back to the present, Winry isn't really aware of any of this. It's interesting that Scar would say that, you are justified in shooting me, but once you pull the trigger, you cannot return, and I will be your enemy. And the next chain link in the chain of hatred will be forged. I mean, Winry's not in a good state here, but I don't know if she could do it, honestly. I mean, obviously the Elric brothers don't want her to. Oh, that's very interesting. Nice little bit of, juxtaposition here. Edward jumped in front of Winry to protect her from Scar, and that sort of contrasts nicely with Scar's brother jumping in front of him, and Dr. Rockbell jumping in front of his wife. It seems like it's enough to sort of cause Scar to second-guess himself. Oh boy, unfortunately Ed's got some explaining to do. Alphonse says get her to safety while I keep following Scar, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be discussed here and precious little time to do it. So I find it interesting that the thing Winry seems most distraught about is how she wasn't able to do anything. The guy that killed her parents and tried to kill Ed and Elle on multiple instances, she had the means to do something, and through luck or good judgment, she was unable to do anything. And Edward's kind of chalking this up to, you help deliver a baby, your hands enable life, they should not tarnish themselves by bringing death. And that's sort of like, in the same vein as the Hippocratic Oath, interestingly enough. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.